1 hour protected time with the slapping, and then I'll just give you the.
Maybe not 1 hour.
1 hour.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 1 minute.
We
Yeah.
are-
I wanna go to bed.
too long.
Yeah, everyone is, yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna be.
1 minute of protected time at the beginning and end of your speeches, and then 4 minutes for protected time for your rebuttal. I'll hold up the time sheet, so I'll show you how much time you have remaining, and then I'll count down the last 10 seconds. And yeah, so I think that's everything.
What's each team?
Oh, so team N is government side, and then team B over here is side opposition. Okay, I think that's everything. So without further ado, I'll call the round to order. This round will feature team N debating for side government, and then team B debating for side opposition. On the resolution, this House would allow internet service providers to charge websites different prices to allow websites to receive higher and lower speeds of access. So I'll now call upon the Prime Minister to open the debate with a 7-minute speech, with the first and last minute protected.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, honorable judges. Thank you, lovely audience, and thank you, lovely opposition, for being here today. So the motion brought forward to the House today is that this House would allow internet service providers to charge websites different prices to allow websites to receive higher and lower speeds of access. But for further clarification on this resolution, the government has drafted up a few definitions. So the first one being internet service providers, which are telecommunication companies such as Shaw, Bell, Telus, etc. And higher speeds of access being the ultimate speed that a website can achieve, which is comparable to networks such as 5G networks, and lower speeds of access actually being faster than their current speed, but still significantly lower than the higher speed that's been implemented. So before we get into our 3 constructives for the government side, I'd like to ask a little question. How many people here in the audience are students? How many are students? And of all those students, has there ever been a time where you're procrastinating for an assignment, and it's about 11:30, and you're waiting until, and you're trying to draft up some sort of document, trying to do some sort of research, and it's due at 12 o'clock? It may be possible that there's been a time where you're actually trying to search on a website, but it freezes on you, or it's too slow for your research. And you're trying to frantically tap the refresh button, but it's not refreshing on time. Well, this resolution would like to help that problem. I'd like to help the fact that you have a better internet experience. And it's not only for students, but it's for all people that use the internet. This is a tech savvy generation. And what do we want? We need the speed for accessing certain websites, because not only is it for our entertainment, but it's also for the purpose of why we're in school or why you have a certain type of job. And it can really help with essentially whatever problem you have.
Mr. Speaker, the member mentioned students. Sorry.
So to get into our 3 constructives today, we'd like to talk about the first one being the differentiation of websites and companies with this resolution being put into place. The second one being a better internet experience, and the third one being a fundamental strategy of capitalism. Now, to get into our first constructive, we'd like to talk about how websites already have to pay for ads. So essentially, it's almost like a marketing strategy. So what websites have already been doing is that websites pay bigger websites such as Google or any other, or like Bing or Microsoft websites, to essentially have their page or their URL onto another website as a form of an ad, and that's a marketing strategy. Another way that websites already pay for services for marketing strategy is search engine optimization. So when you do go and search on Amazon, what do you see when you first click? You find out what are the top searches of the day. When you click on Google, what are the top searches of the day? Every single year, Google actually comes out with the top searches that have been there. So you would know who was a top search professional athlete, who was a top search S&P company, You would search anything that you want to search up, any type of category you'd like to find out about. You'd find out who was the top search for that specific category. So websites already pay for services like this. So what we would like to do, what the government would like to do, is we'd like to ask for websites to pay internet service providers for a higher speed of access. Because essentially, websites have been evolving. They've already been evolving for their marketing strategy, and what would this do? This would only increase that strategy. It would increase the competitive edge between websites. It would also increase the competitive edge for internet service providers to gain access for that service.
Mr. Speaker, would allowing internet service companies to charge some certain websites more allow them to skew charging websites more that they have an invested interest in?
Thank you for that question. So essentially, telecommunication companies are an oligopoly. So it's not a monopoly. So what that really means is that there are so many different companies out there that even if one company does have an invested interest in another website, well, there's another company to invest their interest in another type of website. Just because a few websites may be tailored to a telecommunications service provider, that doesn't mean that another website's at a disadvantage. It's not like there's only one telecommunications service provider that will be offering this service. This service is for all telecommunications companies in Canada. So if you want to go with Shaw, one company can go with Shaw, but there's still TELUS out there, there's still Bell out there, there's still Rogers out there. There's still a lot of other telecommunications services that can help implement this service for their specific website. And so getting back into my constructive argument, I like to talk about how websites have evolved. So websites have already been using services such as paying for ads and paying for search engine optimization. And this is a step forward. This is growing forward into a new marketing strategy where websites could potentially be allowed to have higher speeds of access. Because for all the students that have been sitting in the crowd and all the judges that have been previous students in their lives, we all know how important internet is. We all know how important it is for websites to have a high speed of access. Because we all know how frustrating it is to sit there for 5 minutes trying to frantically tap the refresh button and you can't get a website to load. Well, that problem will no longer be there if this resolution is put in place.
That's, Mr. Speaker, would the member agree that problem becomes tenfold should companies pay to lower internet access for other internet groups or for other websites, pardon me?
Thank you for that question, for bringing up paying for lower speeds. As we have defined in this resolution, we actually define lower speeds of access being faster than the current speed that's already been there. So these websites that will be charged by these internet service providers, they're not essentially paying for a slower current speed. They have a current speed that's already been set, and what would happen is that their current speed would increase. It's only called lower because it's significantly lower than the higher speed of access, but it is also faster than the current speed they already have. So in a sense, it is actually increasing the internet access speed that they already currently have. So thank you for your time today, and my colleagues will further go into the better internet experience and the fundamental strategy of capitalism this really entails. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I now call the first member of the opposition to take the floor.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, judges, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise before the House today and speak in opposition of the resolution that this House would allow internet service providers to charge websites different prices to allow websites to receive higher and lower speeds of access. Just to get started, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to begin with a definitional challenge. What the Prime Minister came up with was the idea that we're not giving them slower access. It's going to be faster than it currently is, but some companies that pay more can go much faster. Assuming that somehow we can right now build the infrastructure to have every slow internet portal right now immediately upgraded to a faster internet than it is today, but we can still charge them that same amount and have these people paying for slower speeds so that they can, it just simply is illogical. The fact is that There is websites that can be throttled at a much lower speed, and companies that would have to pay much more to be able to access fast internet. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I had a question for the opposition. So why would companies pay the same price to receive the difference in speeds, because the resolution says there's different prices for the varying speeds?
The issue is that there's a very, very critical power dynamic issue going on here. It gives the companies that are providing the internet the ability to slow down companies that are websites that are unfavorable in their eyes, and allows them to promote websites that they want. I'm getting into some I'd like to first outline the burden for side government. They must prove that the resolution will make the internet better for Canadian businesses and citizens. Let's talk about the status quo right now. This resolution is not allowed, or telecommunication companies are not allowed to select who gets served better. The pricing is standardized and no discrimination on availability to access the internet. This means that all businesses have the equal opportunity to advertise their products, to be able to conduct e-commerce on the internet, and be able to show their products and have an equal opportunity for success. I'd like to begin with some clash with some things that the Prime Minister said. Even if we accept the definition that the internet speeds in the lower speeds that the definition proposes, that there are still tremendous power dynamic issues. Said there will be a better internet experience, but the fact is that even if we accept that there are higher and lower speeds, does it not point to the fact that people will very logically go to the websites that give them a higher speed rather than the ones that are slower? And there's companies that are owning these websites are the ones who are allowed to decide who gets this faster internet, and they're allowed to charge them different prices to be able to achieve that. Prime Minister spoke about how this is a marketing strategy for the companies. This is a stunning mischaracterization of the resolution. The resolution is proposing that we give an oligopoly, that being Rogers, TELUS, Bell in Canada, the ability to handpick companies that are able to succeed online. They can't simply say that this resolution makes the internet better for all, and that certain websites are owned by certain companies, and there is currently price fit. I'd like to use the example right now, Mr. Speaker, that just this year, the Canadian CRTC issued a ruling on Canadian companies like Rogers and Bell on their cell phone plans, where they had to stop throttling people's cellular data access on unlimited data plans. What we saw was that these companies were working together to exploit the pricing on consumers, and the argument that the Prime Minister used is that if they don't want to use a certain provider, they can just use a different one. But the fact is that they are working together to price fix the market, and it isn't something that will magically fix itself. So getting into my first constructive point, that giving an oligopoly the ability to control information is a slippery slope for business and Canadians. This will hurt all Canadians and will decrease competition on the internet. So power among ISPs, as I mentioned, 90% is consolidated among Bell, TELUS, and Rogers. Bell owns companies like Bell Media, with channels like CTV and other like TSN and other channels like that. And this allows these companies to control the news that is spread on the internet and the speed at which you can access. In the example of a negative story that is critical of Bell could be punished using this resolution, slowed down, and restricted as a result of this resolution. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, is the leader of the opposition aware that charging those websites a higher price doesn't necessarily mean change in price for the consumers that use this service?
Our second speaker will elaborate on this more, but to quickly answer your question, the price could be passed on to consumers in this way, and that is just one of the issues with this resolution. This is the example of SOPA and PIPA, which is legislation passed by the American Congress, which was pushed by lobbyists and big internet service providers. What it was essentially this resolution that would allow companies to offer a preferential treatment to websites, charging them more for faster service. This was met by bipartisan disapproval among basically all American citizens. There was a grassroots movement to stop this immediately. And there are not many other issues where we can see this type of public disapproval. people get their information from the internet, and having these companies, giving these companies the ability to give preferential treatment to the company, to these websites, establishes tremendous power barriers. It allows them to establish new barriers to entry, slowing their competitors down to sway the public towards their own product. The American example, AT&T owns the company HBO. HBO has a streaming service called HBO Go. If this resolution, in the context of this resolution, AT&T would be allowed to slow down the service speeds for Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, and this would unilaterally make people more favorable towards HBO Go because they have a faster speed. This is only a streaming service, Mr. Speaker. We're not even talking about news control. With Bell and their CTV news service, might not even consider going on JDC if their website is 10 times slower. And this is why, Mr. Speaker, we believe that this resolution must fall, and we must have net neutrality for all.
Thank you, side opposition. I now call the first member of side government.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, audience, and of course the opposition for being here today, and thank you, judges, for being here as well. I would like to start the speech just reviewing some of the points that the opposition has mentioned in their first speech. They said that we are asking for internet providers to provide new infrastructure and new internet services that are not here yet. However, we're not asking the internet services to set up new infrastructure. We're just allowing the option for them to do it. It is an option that we're gonna open, and they can take it if they can. We're not forcing anyone to take this specific resolution. We're giving people another option. We're giving these internet providers another option to market their products to other websites. As well, at the end of the speech, the leader of the opposition mentioned that we're creating barriers of entry for websites and barriers of entry for other internet providers. However, we're not slowing down the internet speed for current sites, as the Prime Minister clearly defined at the beginning. The lowest of the speeds will be faster than the current ones, but the current websites will not be slowed down at all. They are still in the same speed. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, how can the member reasonably propose that we're going to speed up the internet as a whole without developing new infrastructures?
We're not saying to increase the internet speed as a whole. We're just saying that certain the internet providers that choose to do it, that can increase their capacity of speed, they can do so if they want to, and they can charge the websites to use this service. We're not forcing anyone to go into more of a into a different service than before. We're just allowing them that option. So for getting into my point that this will bring better internet experience for everyone in Canada, I would like to just touch up on what the Prime Minister said at the beginning of how we think of the first thing here is we think of students and universities always seeking for the best and fastest internet experience. Every university has an operating system that they like to work at, and imagine that the service be 10 times, 5 times as faster as it is right now. Submitting documents faster as ever. Why would the opposition deny the opportunity for students to have that faster speed? It makes no sense. Of course, we can offer that option for websites to stay behind, and those websites will become obsolete, as we have seen in the past, going from 2G to 3G to 4G. If they don't want to upgrade, they can't. They cannot upgrade, but they will stay behind in the trend. The tech industry will see a huge exponential growth as well in development of websites, as well as fast as people can code. More websites with faster access than ever will be developed, and more websites than ever will come out with faster speeds as we've never seen before, thanks to this resolution being being passed, yes.
Can the member explain how a new community of competition among the internet can be facilitated when we are consolidating power amongst 3 internet service providers?
Well, if we will be consolidating these 3 internet powers, it means that we're giving the option for websites to go to this internet, to these 3 internet powers, and they will too increase their speeds. These websites can have the chance to go to those internet providers, and they will pay them, and then that internet speed will be faster. The only reason that we want to pass, one of the reasons that we want to pass this resolution in the government side is because we want to give people the option. Again, we want to give people an option to choose of faster or slower internet access. Of course, we're incentivizing people to use the faster one because we want to use the slower one. But at the same time, people have that option if they don't want to pay that extra buck for the faster internet speeds. If we think not only of students and tech industry, we can think of other industries as well that can benefit from this. Any company now uses technology, uses internet. There are basically no businesses that have not have a website now, that they don't have internet access. So this will benefit every single website, every single company basically in Canada, because we're giving them an option to go to these internet service providers and giving them the chance to have as mentioned by the Prime Minister, an extra marketing incentive for people to use their website rather than other websites. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, can the member explain how having to pay a higher price and spend more money on their internet provider make their company better off?
Well, you mentioned there's 2 competitors that are basically selling the same product or similar product, and they're looking for a way to differentiate themselves. And one of their main income is sales online. Why would you go to a slower internet service that you can search things slower when you can go to a faster one? That's how they will market themselves from now on. This gives them the option to market themselves like that. We're giving companies, as the Prime Minister said, a chance to differentiate themselves even more than they are now already. The websites have been looking pretty similar lately, and they've been looking for ways to differentiate, and this is one of the best ways that the government thinks that we can do that. The faster internet access does not only benefit the consumers that pay for this internet services, it benefits companies, it benefits every single stakeholder that uses the internet. So basically every single person in Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Second member of the opposition can now take the podium.
Good evening, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for having us here today for such a nice debate. I'd like to begin with some points of clash on the second speaker from side side government, before I get to my constructive speech on how this resolution is economically bad for Canadian business and for Canadian citizens. Now, to get into clash, the member mentioned university students and how all university students would like to see faster access to their websites. That's all in good. But you know what university students don't like is when their tuition goes up. Because we have very little money, Mr. Speaker, and that is exactly what would happen if universities are expected to or going to pay for the services noted in the resolution above my head. These things aren't just going to come for free. If we want the faster internet, we're going to have to pay for it, And those costs aren't just going to be eaten up by the university, they're going to be passed to whoever is paying the university for their services, i.e. the education that the students are receiving. Now, I'd also like to talk about this notion that this will benefit every company in Canada, because every company is going to have access to fast internet speeds. Mr. Speaker, last time I checked, not every company in Canada was a giant corporation. Canada is a country filled with small businesses. It's a country filled with corporations that are struggling to make it in a globalized economy that is taking place online. We're putting in another barrier with this resolution. And finally, I'd like to use the words of the member himself. This is a marketing tool. Companies can use this as a way to say, come to our website rather than someone else's, because our website is faster. But quite frankly, Mr. Speaker, what we're seeing today in Canada is firms that aren't able to pay, which is what I'll be talking about in my speech today. Passing this resolution will reduce the competition in all online markets and industries, and increase the barriers to entry for new firms, and decrease the ability for small firms to operate effectively. The resulting impact of this is bad for the Canadian economy, bad for growth, and bad for the consumer. Under this resolution, large firms will be able to pay the hefty fees associated with gaining faster internet access. This is something that is much more difficult for small businesses to do, Mr. Speaker. This means that it will become harder to start small businesses, harder to grow your small business. Mr. Speaker, every day billions of dollars are spent online. The online marketplace has become an essential and vital part of the economic system, Mr. Speaker. And in enacting this will reduce the ability for firms, small firms, to have access to that system. It's already hard for these firms to compete online, small firms to compete online, against companies with either hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars in market cap. Companies like Amazon, companies like Walmart, companies like Wish.com or Shopify, Mr. Speaker. Companies that have the cash on hand to pay to gain the advantage. Mr. Speaker, it's already hard to compete with these companies. So why would we enact a policy which is making it harder for Canadian companies to compete with these large, forceful companies, Mr. Speaker? Having to pay for higher internet access makes competition more difficult. Mr. Speaker, already today, 80% of small businesses fail because it's already hard to compete. The tech industry, Mr. Speaker, has been the largest growing industry over the last 2 decades. And this year, tech passed the energy industry as the most valuable industry in the world. This is a huge opportunity for Canada to take a part in the massive growth being seen in the online globalized marketplace. And if we're placing a hindrance on our small firms who do not have the cash to pay to take part in this, Mr. Speaker, that is a disadvantage to Canada. Mr. Speaker, if small Canadian firms suddenly face new barriers to entry, it reduces their ability to be competitive. This means that the 80% of Canadians who work in small firms suddenly have their jobs more at risk because their firms have become less competitive. They have less of an ability to grow and sell their product, Mr. Speaker. If this resolution passes, Canadian firms will become less competitive in the marketplace, a marketplace which has been the fastest growing marketplace in the last decade and put up to 80% of jobs at risk. So we believe on that alone, Mr. Speaker, this resolution must fall. But also, what about the consumer, Mr. Speaker? When firms have a new cost placed upon them that they have to pay to take part, of the marketplace, that cost does not get eaten up by the consumer. It's passed on directly, or does not get eaten up by the firm itself, it gets passed on directly to the consumer, Mr. Speaker. This is something that we learned in Econ 100. So, Mr. Speaker, what have I shown for you here today? I've shown a complete lack of understanding of how the small firm competes in today's globalized economy coming from side government. as well as an explanation of how these large firms are difficult to deal with already, and by placing new barriers to entry and new hurdles that they must overcome in their current marketplace, we're only making it harder for Canadian businesses, we're only making it harder for the Canadian economy, we're only making it harder for the 80% of Canadian workers that work in these businesses, and we're making it harder for the consumer as well, because they'll have to pay higher prices for anything they buy online, because the firms will have to pay for this higher internet access. Mr. Speaker, because of this and all reasons we've mentioned before, we cannot stay neutral on this issue. We need to guarantee net neutrality for all. Thank you.
Thank you, side opposition. Side government, your second member can now take the floor.
Opposition for being here today, the enthusiastic audience members, and obviously our very lovely judges for being here today. I'd like to start my speech by making my disagreements with some of the opposition's points very clear, and how maybe I'll have to get into an Econ 102 lecture here, because they clearly don't seem to be understanding the fundamentals of capitalism here. And it works out perfectly, because that's exactly what my constructive is. Now, they've been talking about how it's worse for the citizens, how they're going to suffer at the end of the day. That's exactly what we're here to do. We're here to protect the citizens. We're here to make sure that they have the best economic environment that is possible for them. And I'll get to how we do that in a minute. Once we get over how the opposition it cannot grapple the fact that innovation leads the industry today. The opposition is unable to come to terms with the fact that a growing demand for evolution in the internet industry means that there will be infrastructure, means that companies will be willing to invest more into development of technologies that will increase internet speeds. They are unable to understand that there are companies that are willing to go the extra mile, and not for the market's good, but for their own sake. They have a stake in the business because it is their business. They're willing to invest money into infrastructure. They will grow new infrastructure that allows more speed. And yes, I'd like to take that question.
Mr. Speaker, can the member please explain how this resolution is the express way to faster internet speeds through innovation, and not the current market system, which has given us all of the innovations that we've seen in the last 2-3 decades in the ISP department?
Thank you very much for that question. That's exactly what I'm aiming to answer with my constructive today. Now, this resolution allows another platform for businesses to compete. It allows for another platform for internet providers to compete. And what that means is that they'll invest more in infrastructure. I've already mentioned this before. I don't see the point in mentioning it again. And another point that the opposition mentioned is collusion, is the fact that there is price fixing in the market. That is illegal. That is a different issue. That is not the issue that we're talking about in this resolution. And so I won't even like to address that. Now, we've heard a lot about how we're going to be charging the customers, how you as students are going to be worse off, how we're all broke. That's a different issue, my lord. Mr. Speaker, what I'm here to say is that clearly the resolution states that we are not charging the customers. We are charging websites that want to have access to consumers who want higher speeds. And we've heard how that cost is going to trickle down to the consumers. Well, do you realize that internet service providers now have a different revenue stream? They have a stream where they can make revenue from websites. Instead of overcharging customers, instead of ensuring that consumers have to pay the price, they actually have a different revenue stream that they can exploit. Which means the citizens, who the government is arguing for, are safe, have a better environment, have cheaper access to internet. Now, take that question later, please. The online market is very important, and the opposition has very well mentioned that, and that is exactly why this resolution, that's over my head now, is important. It is the most valuable industry, as mentioned by the opposition, and that is exactly why it needs to be left alone. Now, Canada is a capitalist economy. For those who don't know, that means that there's minimal government intervention. And not allowing this bill to pass is also setting a restriction on the innovation, and that is government intervention. That is against the fundamentals of capitalism. Also, this is another way to increase competition between the firms. It allows firms to compete on the basis of speed. That means that we're getting companies like, for example, Netflix, Hulu, who are going to compete to get higher speeds. Who does that benefit? You. That benefits you, who gets higher speed at virtually no cost. Because there's more competition, they're going to cut their prices, and a price war ensues. That's what normally happens in this situation, and the opposition has failed to account for that. They've seen how the cost trickles down, but they haven't been able to counter the point that there is still a price war. There is still an ability for customers to benefit from this and not actually be negatively affected. Now, I'd also like to say that the internet is an ever-evolving business. We've all been the witness to that. We started with ads, then we started with ads on YouTube, which is very annoying, I know. And then we started with search engine optimization. And I don't understand what the problem with this is. What is the issue with this, that we're spending our valuable time here debating this? Because we've already done it before. We've already implemented platforms that enable more competition, and we've seen that it works for all of us. We've seen that YouTube ads might be boring, they might be hard to skip, but they also have made services cheaper, because businesses now have a different revenue stream. And that is exactly what I want to talk about. The internet is a necessity today, and we all know that as students, as general human beings, yes?
Mr. Speaker, if the internet's a necessity, then shouldn't everyone and every company be guaranteed the same speed of access to the internet in the economy?
Thank you very much. But the internet is also a business. Like I said, it's capitalism. You get what you pay for. And if you're willing to pay a higher price, then so be it. And the point I was trying to make is that the internet is a necessity. What that means is that everyone needs access to it. And what we're saying is that this resolution enables internet service providers, again, to make it cheaper for customers who need access to internet, who need access to a service like this, because, like I said before, there is a different revenue stream. The last point I'd like to conclude with is that the consumer ultimately wins. Now, there is a larger market to compete for. There are larger firms competing for your attention, and that obviously is better for you. There are firms that are willing to cut their prices for you. There are firms that are willing to compete for your attention, and I do not see how the opposition thinks that that is bad. I do not see how the opposition thinks that citizens being harmed by, citizens being benefited by this resolution is a problem. And I'd like to conclude this. Thank you.
Government, I now call the third member of the opposition to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, for having us here today. This has been a very interesting round. I'd like to begin my speech with some points of clash that we've seen occur time and time again. First and foremost, we have this ridiculous notion that there is a switch the government can flip to magically make the entire internet faster. That somehow, by proposing a resolution, we're going to make the entire internet faster, and that it is only that will motivate companies to actively pursue faster speeds, when realistically, Madam Speaker, if the internet providers that we have in our country today were able to offer those faster speeds, they would do so because they're trying to compete with each other right now. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, there's this notion that